Hi folks, welcome back to Atebeno Park. Third time I'm keeping it. Today we're working on the Upper Plaza. As you can see, I've already made a little bit of a start on the building extending from the excuse me, the elevator tower for our accessibility challenge guests. This I envision as having shops or other guest facilities on the lower level, and on the upper level, possibly education rooms, uh, possibly offices, some combination, and other park running facilities in the lower levels on the that open on the lower level of the park's elevations. This plaza is called the Upper Plaza because it's elevated from the entry plaza. Uh, no rocket science there. Um, and it, again, as the other buildings, I would prefer it to be adobe rather than concrete, but concrete's my best substitute right now in the hopes that the devs will let us color it later. Um, so I got two things going on here besides that basic building. There's this portico that I'm building now. You can see the arches at either end. And now I'm laying out and using the scaling and rotation features um, to create an archway. Uh, so this arch is going to come out of the side of the building, and it will have friends all along the length. You can see I'm sort of setting up the two ends, and then I will be subdividing things pretty much in halves as a way to get the spacing more or less regular. Um, if I'd been bright, I would have been doing the walls on the bottom part before I did those arches. And I also would have put in this glass roof over the that wooden walkway there um, before I put those in, and I could see what I was doing a little more clearly. Uh, but again, this is being made as I go along, so sometimes I don't always make the best choices um, in terms of the order of doing things. So you might think that those arches look a little bit like ribs, and well, that's part of the intent. Uh, so the glass roof, however, needs a little bit more support. So I'm using the square metal column, sizing it, and then expanding it. Learning the lesson from the accessibility services building, knowing that I'm going to have to do this in two pieces, I deliberately tried to pick it so that it was two halves. And it took a little bit of fussing to get that right, along with the usual double click and getting an extra piece I didn't want. Um, I'm trying to keep the uprights minimal, both for visual aesthetics and for piece count. Um, but I did want to have a base on them since I'm using a wooden decking there. It made sense to me that there would be an anchor. So just three, a little bit of trouble getting them all lined up because of perspective changes as I shifted the camera view. Um, I wanted to have walkway underneath the arches, but I didn't want it to be the wood there. The wood should just be under the glass canopy. But it's very convenient to duplicate that wood because it's the right length and pull it over and then change its material. So a little jump ahead here to the more or less finished version of the building. You can see all the arches and a little bit of extra decorative work near the windows and the decorative banding along the upper edge. You can also, looking in through the passageway, you can see two door sets put in there and some trash cans. Um, all bits of making the building fit into its environment. Uh, Sorry about selecting that there. And a little bit of a look at some trick out of the rest of the tower with its elevator floor and the upper area to over the view, an overview area for the park. And now transitioning to a significant point of the Upper Plaza, the Mini Aviary for another animal that will fit in there and the entrance to the lab. There are three different biomes you can set the Mini Aviary to, and I decided to do a second one here. And you're not going to get to see an animal in it yet because that and the second animal for this has not been announced yet. I decided to use mulch to lay in groundwork underneath the aviary and wanted to bring it out to the walkway edge. So this is, I think this was the scrubland take. I chose it, and of course the scrubland rocks behind it to give a color and vegetation difference to what I'm doing up here compared to the park in general. So you can see I put an archway in there. That's a resized doorway arch wall to remind me where the gate is, because I don't know how important accessibility to that will be once we get keepers in the game. I wanted to be prepared for that eventuality, and excuse me, the voice a little rough today, and replacing the groundwork at approximately the same place the foundation was in the standard aviary build, and pulling it down because the animals in here are small. We don't need any screening on that. This build is intended to be fairly simple and straightforward. Nothing too fancy. Glassed in so you can see the animal inside. The fancy bits will come in, such as they are, in blending it into the rock wall, which will serve as one of the walls for this enclosure. And also a little bit of stuff to be a heat vent for a glassed-in enclosure in this environment. We want our animals in here to be happy and not die of heat stroke. It seems reasonable. Don't want to have to keep cloning them every other day. That kind of cost adds up. So I'm also going to be putting in some additional landscaping, some plants and some rocks in there once I get the structure itself built. You can see that I'm playing with the size of these roof elements, particularly when I can catch all three at once, because I want an open space in the middle, and that'll be part of the venting that I was talking about coming in a bit. So this proved to be pretty fussy to get it to sit in the right place and be over the walls. It doesn't look like it matters that much now, but it will. A brief experiment with the rounded things, and since I'm not doing a rounded wall, that wasn't going to work out. So that had to go and back to what I had, which made a little bit more work for me. So I'm deliberately keeping these roofs above the wall height because that's going to be part of the venting scheme. And once I decided to get this end piece in, it became clear to me I still didn't have the roof in the right place. So you will see me fuss around with it some more. Uh, so I build most of the time on pause, just to keep guests from wandering in and getting in my way while I work. It's just easier that way. Uh, in the background, you can see the roundabout that will connect to the genetics lab. I presume any kind of operation like this would offer special tours of some portions of the lab, because that would be of interest to people coming to see genetically recreated dinosaurs. Uh, and they probably charge a premium for it as well. Uh, and even people who don't take the tour might want to get a glimpse of the lab, or take a look at it in the hopes of seeing something that they probably wouldn't get to see. So the uh, the top I did with a girder, mostly as a suggestive bit for this extra ventilation. And for the bit between the roof and the walls, I'm using a stretched out version of one of the fencing pieces. Uh, because when you stretch that little guy out a lot, its circular holes in the metal bit of the fence start looking like slats, much like a ventilation screen. So I thought I'd take advantage of that, and use it in this application. So once I got that all in place, obviously needed to make sure everything was sitting nicely and doing a good job. And then it was time to do the standoff fencing around the glass, because guests are notorious for banging on things. And I wanted to keep this relatively minimal in looks, so that also means minimal pieces. So just 3 for the long dimension, and 3 stretch pieces, and then adjusting them to fit the overall length that it's going to have. On the side with the door arch, of course, I had to do a little bit more work in that regard. And on the end, I needed to cut it down. And since it was about 2 1/3 of these stretch fencing units, I decided to just crunch that one up a little bit more, because it didn't look too badly. It's a little more problematic here at the doorway, because it goes down to the narrow one, particularly making the smaller fence against the rock. So I decided to bury that in and take advantage of the very much smaller uprights on the fence to be the gate for getting to the door into the mini aviary. That meant I needed some anchor for the end of the fence, and even though the wood texture and color is not quite the same, I got as close as I could with this 1-meter block column, and had it set inside the rock, which as likely as not is probably supposed to be fake rock, and then needed to plug some of the holes using as small a piece of glass as possible to have to be fit into the contour of the rock surface. The fabrication shop thanked me for that, at least in my head canon. But I design them and I build them in this thing. But if this were a real park, some poor schmuck would have to be doing whatever the designer wanted, and probably cursing said designer for some of the choices. So, glassed in, vented, fenced in, looking pretty good. Obviously, a little bit more stuff so we can keep our guests educated, with the usual using a dark window for an education screen. One for each of the accessible sides of the exhibit. Looking forward to the day we get actual education screens, but in the meantime, these convey the idea at least. So there we go. And the usual accidental double click when duplicating things. So time to play with the extra foliage, and this is the scrubland biome foliage. Italian straw flowers, which look remarkably like a lot of small bushy things that have yellow flowers, and foxtail palms. The idea was to make it feel like this mini aviary is sitting in its own environment, even though it's not the natural environment here. Suggestive of it and not terribly functional. The plants themselves would probably have some difficulty in a tropical environment. At least some of them would. The aloe vera, for example. And I tried to set up something where the park might be able to make this a little bit more controlled environment. Obviously, they can't keep the tropical rains off the stuff outside the glass, but oh well. It is a fantasy park after all, so there's a little bit of leeway there. So now doing the rock work to set off this area. And I want to leave a path, which I realized after I stretched that rock out and moved it over, because the keeper for this I see coming out of the genetics lab. And it's the nearest facility, and I wanted to leave a little path where he would have a short walk from there to the habitat. And elsewhere, I wanted rocks that would act as screens to encourage people to come in to see the exhibit, to give them a little more privacy while they see it, give the animals a little bit more privacy as well. So the rocks are being set up to corral all that scrubland vegetation, to reflect light for them, to keep them, sunnier and let them dry off faster. And if necessary, I envision if these could possibly be fake rocks, and the park might have some kind of environmental mitigation devices buried in them to, blow dry air onto the plants or something. So now the guest paths into the exhibit are designed to be off the corners of the aviary, and a secondary one directly into the side, which purpose will be a little more clear when some more stuff goes into the park. And of course, terrain painting, again, trying to mimic the environment for the aviary animal and in this area. And this will transition into the more natural environment of this tropical park location in a couple of places. Yeah, that's a concept anyway. Always fussy placing rocks at those tight corners. One of the things, as great as the rocks look in Prehistoric Kingdom, one of the things that always impressed me about Planet Zoo's rocks were they seem to have deliberately designed a couple of rocks for those pointy corners that are inevitable in placing the paths and stuff, which gives you the chance to have a nice clean line there. And the PK rocks are, well, they don't seem to have that quite design aesthetic. They do blend together well, and I like that a lot. Little jump ahead there to get the ring of trees around the pathway to the genetics lab. That's a standard trick. Put one, duplicate it, stretch it across the circle, and then pick that pair and duplicate them and rotate them around. Much like building a circular building, except done with plants. And since the plants are modular, that can happen. Doing some more ground painting, trying to decide on what plant or plants to put in the center of that roundabout. Currently, in lieu of having, statue decorations in the early design work for Prehistoric Kingdom, they showed off a concept statue that would work really well here, and I hope they do finally execute that, because I liked the idea a lot and wanted to use it with the genetics lab. It's a statue of the DNA spiral, double helix, and at the top it transforms into a couple of pterosaurs taking flight. Lovely concept. I really hope they revisit it and bring it into the game. More rock work to set up this entrance area into the lab, and we're coming close to the end of the video after this sequence. So just a reminder, if you like the videos, click like. If you want to see more, I'm probably going to do some more anyway, but it does encourage me if you subscribe. It lets me know I'm not just shouting out there into the ether. And so the bamboo there against the rock is, again, part of that privacy screening effect. And even though it's not listed as a tropical plant, I mean, clearly the Bengal bamboo does grow in tropical environments. So it's a great screening plant. I'm really looking forward to more variations on it. And they should be coming eventually. So one of the things you may have noticed when I was putting down the pile of rocks on the far side of the exhibit from where we're working right now, I was trying to get them overlapping with the scrubland rocks and sort of get a transitional zone. That was part of what I was talking about blending things in a little bit. One of the things I'm doing by putting the larger rocks at the corners here, that's a park design thing to encourage people from cutting corners, discourage people from cutting corners. People are people. They take the shortest path, and if you want your design to look like your design all the time, as opposed to having it modified by random people, you need to incorporate things in your design that will discourage them from their own creativity and their pathing. So some rocks in, the Italian star flower, or whatever those small little yellow flower bushes are in your imagination, to edge this whole surface. We are shy of flowering things for edging, unfortunately. And that, I presume, will change as time goes on. This is nice, but I would like to have some other choices than yellow and foxglove. I wanted to have the flowering bushes go all the way around the circle on the inside and then come out in an arc for part of it as a sort of a statement of what the genetics lab is its entrance is, how it welcomes you in. And then I switched to the non-flowering ones to finish that. And then a fast swipe of paintbrushed bamboo to finish that bamboo corridor toward the genetics lab. Because this is an offshoot, this is not the park proper per se. And there will be two other paths going off this Upper Plaza. One to the Jurassic area of the park and one to the Cretaceous area. The water feature obviously needed some attention in terms of plantings, and it's getting that now. So, next time, do a little bit more work on this plaza area to finish off a couple of things, and it'll be time to move on to the first animal habitat. Who will it be? Tune in next time. So, once again, Dino Bob, thanks you for your watching and spending some time with me. I know I enjoy building it. As I mentioned, I often build instead of record, and I hope to get better at that. So you get to see the builds. So thanks for stopping by. See you again in another video. The next one will be more on the plaza and not quite the habitat, because there was more work to do.